Tonight might be her last night. The ICU doctor warned my mother over the phone, his voice steady with grave urgency. I was lying in a hospital bed, hooked to monitors, my breath shallow after a horrific car accident. My mother's cold response shattered what little spirit I had left. We're busy. Your sister needs us more right now. Stop dramatic calls. They never showed up. Not that night, not the next. 7 days later, my mother and golden child sister finally strutted into my room, expecting to find me begging for their attention or feeling guilty. But my bed was completely empty, perfectly made. Sitting in the center of the mattress was a single, folded note. The second my mother opened it and read the truth, the color completely drained from her face, and her hands began to shake uncontrollably. My name is Clara, I'm 32 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I was the invisible daughter. But nothing prepares you for the moment you realize your own mother considers your life optional. The metal crunching sound was the last thing I heard before my world went pitch black. A distracted driver ran a red light, T-boning my sedan at 50 miles an hour. When the paramedics pried my mangled car open, my heart rate was dropping fast. They rushed me to the emergency room, unconscious, bleeding internally, and fighting for every breath. While the trauma team worked frantically to stabilize me, Dr. Vance, the lead ICU physician, grabbed my phone to call my emergency contact. My mother, Eleanor. Mrs. Reed, Dr. Vance said, his voice steady with grave urgency over the speakerphone while nurses prepped me for emergency surgery. Your daughter Clara was in a severe car accident. She's in critical condition, and tonight might be her last night. You need to come to the hospital immediately. There was a brief pause on the line. I was barely conscious, slipping in and out, but I heard her reply as if she was standing right next to me. Look, Dr. Vance. My mother sighed, her tone dripping with annoyance rather than panic. We're extremely busy right now. Her sister, Chloe, is having a complete emotional crisis because her engagement party caterer cancelled. Chloe needs us here right now. Stop making these dramatic calls just because Clara wants attention. Madam, you don't understand, Dr. Vance insisted, his jaw tightening. She is going into surgery right now. She may not survive the night. Clara has always been dramatic, Eleanor dismissed coldly. Tell her we'll stop by in a few days when things settle down. The line went dead. Dr. Vance looked at the phone in disbelief, then down at me. A single tear slipped down my temple as the anesthesia took over. My own mother had just weighed my survival against a party caterer and decided I wasn't worth the drive. Growing up, this was always the story of my life. Chloe was 3 years younger, the golden child who could do no wrong. If Chloe wanted piano lessons, my parents paid for top-tier instructors. If I wanted to go to college, I was told to take out student loans because Chloe's future needs a strong foundation. I became the self-sufficient daughter out of survival, while Chloe learned that the entire world revolved around her every whim. My parents poured all their emotional energy and financial resources into her, leaving me with whatever crumbs were left over. When I finally woke up from surgery 24 hours later, the room was blindingly white and completely silent. No flowers, no cards, and no family sitting in the bedside chair. Just the rhythmic beep of the heart monitor keeping me company. My body ached with a deep, throbbing pain from broken ribs and a shattered collarbone, but the hollow ache in my chest was far worse. A kind nurse named Sarah walked in to check my vitals. Seeing me staring blankly at the empty visitor chair, she gave me a look of deep compassion. Your family hasn't called back, Clara, she said softly, placing a warm hand on my shoulder. But you're not alone. The hospital social worker and I are right here. That was the exact moment the final piece of my naivety died. I realized I had spent 32 years begging for love from people who viewed me as nothing more than an afterthought. But while my mother and sister thought I was lying in that bed helpless, they forgot one crucial detail. I wasn't just the invisible daughter anymore. I was an adult who had spent years quietly building a life entirely independent of them. While I lay recovering over the next few days, I didn't spend my time crying. Instead, I called the one person who truly had my back, Mr. Harrison, a family estate attorney who had been a loyal friend to my late grandfather. Together, we began putting a plan into motion that would change everything. If you've ever dealt with a family member who always put a golden child first while ignoring your existence, drop a comment down below and tell me your story. I read every single one. 7 days after the accident, the door to my hospital room swung open. My mother walked in first, wearing a tailored pastel coat, followed closely by Chloe, who was busy scrolling through her phone. They didn't enter with frantic relief or eyes full of tears. Instead, my mother had her chin held high, her lips set in that familiar line of annoyance, fully expecting to find me lying in bed, desperate for their presence so she could lecture me about causing unnecessary family drama. "Clara, we finally managed to clear some time," my mother announced, her voice echoing in the quiet room as she stepped past the privacy curtain. Chloe's caterer issue took days to sort out, and frankly, calling Dr. Vance to guilt us was completely out of line. "You need to understand that your sister—" She stopped dead in her tracks. The room was completely still. The 4-pole was pushed off to the side, unplugged and dark. The heart monitors were silent. And the hospital bed, which they had assumed would hold a broken, weeping daughter begging for forgiveness, was completely empty. The sheets were pulled tight, crisp and unwrinkled, perfectly made by the nursing staff earlier that morning. Chloe finally looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Where is she? Did they move her to a cheaper ward?" "She probably went to the cafeteria to get attention," my mother muttered, though a flicker of unease crossed her face. Then, Chloe noticed it. Sitting directly in the center of the white mattress was a crisp, white envelope with my mother's name written across the front in my dark, precise handwriting. My mother scoffed, stepping forward to snatch it off the bed. A dramatic note. Typical. She tore the envelope open with sharp, impatient fingers, unfolding the single sheet of paper inside. But as her eyes scanned the first few lines, the irritation on her face melted away. The color drained from her cheeks until she looked as pale as the bedsheets, and the paper began to tremble uncontrollably in her hand. The note read, "Mother, when Dr. Vance told you I was dying, you said you were too busy. So, I decided to stop wasting your time forever." What my mother and Chloe didn't know was that my late grandfather, the only person in the family who truly saw me, had set up a private family trust before he passed away. He knew my parents' financial reckless spending and how they poured every dollar into Chloe's spoiled lifestyle while neglecting everything else. To protect the family legacy, grandfather had named me as the sole trustee and primary beneficiary, giving me full control over the family home and the business accounts once I turned 30. For the past 2 years, I had quietly allowed my parents to live in grandfather's mansion rent-free, and I had been funding Chloe's extravagant lifestyle, including her upcoming luxury wedding, out of my own pocket. I had kept quiet, hoping that maybe, just maybe, my generosity would earn me a place in their hearts. But as I lay in that ICU bed, listening to my mother dismiss my life for a party caterer, the illusion completely shattered. While they were busy ignoring my recovery, Mr. Harrison and I were finalizing the legal paperwork. The note continued, "Since I am invisible to you, so are my resources. As of 8 o'clock this morning, the trust accounts funding Chloe's wedding, her allowance, and your credit cards have been permanently frozen. Furthermore, Mr. Harrison has issued a 30-day eviction notice for the house. You chose Chloe when I was dying, so now you can rely on her to pay your bills." Chloe grabbed the note from my mother's hands, reading it furiously. "What does she mean, frozen? My wedding deposit is due today." My mother's phone suddenly began ringing frantically. It was the bank, followed immediately by a call from Mr. Harrison's office confirming the eviction proceedings. My mother collapsed into the bedside chair, clutching her chest, her face completely pale. They had spent decades treating me like an inconvenient ghost, never realizing that I was the only thing holding their comfortable world together. I didn't stay in Sacramento to watch the fallout. With Mr. Harrison's help, I was transferred to a private rehabilitation center along the coast, where I spent the next 2 months healing my body and rebuilding my spirit. When my phone blew up with dozens of frantic calls and sobbing voicemails from my mother and sister, begging for forgiveness and asking where they were supposed to live, I didn't answer. I simply blocked their numbers and deleted the messages. Today, I live in a quiet beach town, running my own successful consulting firm and spending my mornings listening to the ocean waves. The house in Sacramento was sold, and the proceeds were redirected into a charitable foundation supporting trauma survivors who have no family to rely on. It took facing death in a cold ICU room for me to realize a painful truth. Blood does not make a family. True family consists of the people who show up for you when you are at your lowest, not the ones who treat your existence like a burden. Walking away from my mother and sister was the hardest thing I ever had to do, but it was also the moment I finally reclaimed my life, my worth, and my dignity. Thank you so much for following my story to the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below letting me know which city or country you're watching from today. I love seeing how far our community reaches. On the screen right now, you'll see 2 other incredible story scripts from our channel that I know will completely surprise you. Click one to watch next, and I'll see you in the next story.